Day 2, Scene 1. First things first, said Mum as they breakfasted. I must take you to see Koiora Park, just around the corner. What's its special thing? Asked Anira. Oh, you know, the usual stuff around here. Bubbling mud pools, hot springs. There are even some tiled wading pools so you can relax your feet. Won't that keep you awake, though? Anira poked at her cereal. Mum looked at her oddly. Why should it do that? The water is like caffeine? Anira faltered. When you touch it? Of course it isn't, sweetheart. Where on earth did you get that idea? What? Think quickly now. Oh, just something I heard. Someone's been playing jokes on you, I think. Mum shook her head. Better not be a teacher, or I'll have words with them. No, not a teacher. Mum waited. Anira gave no further details. Mum went back to talking about the park, glancing sideways at Anira when she thought she wasn't looking. Anira's mind whirled. Clearly, touching the water had kept her awake. She'd thought this was universal to everyone except young children. It hadn't affected Quincy, after all. But maybe she was wrong. What about the other effects? The heightened awareness? The mind trip? The sharpened senses? Maybe no one else felt those either. She'd have to watch her words, and not assume others would know what she had experienced. What if I imagined it? That would be really freaky. The memory of last night was so real. A slight sense of panic tickled at her toes, and she shoveled her food to dissipate the sensation. So what if Rotorua does things to me? Just accept that and chill. She took a breath and calmed a little. But wouldn't that mean I'm a freak? No, she was not going there. Not now. She needed to do more research on people like that kid's grandmother had known. People with odd abilities. People like herself, if it wasn't something she'd dreamed up in the night. She'd written half the night on wild ideas, sensible cures, and a new approach to peace talks, but who would listen to them from a teenager? Besides, they were totally far out. Then she'd watched the moon sink towards its setting and return to the cabin before dawn. She had padded back along the heated pathway by the boiling stream, through the trees, into the clearing, sliding the cabin door open and shut with as much silence as she could muster. Mum had mumbled something in her sleep, and Anira had stepped into the ensuite so as to have an excuse to be up. She had gotten into bed and surfed the web a bit on her phone until it could be considered a decent time to get up. And this morning she felt none the worse for wear, although she had not slept any more. The buzz in her head had abated slightly in the shower, which she presumed was sourced from a less mineral spring. There was still a hint of the same sensation in its water, as there probably would be anywhere in the region, but it was much closer to normal. She had emerged ready to face the day. Oh my gosh, what am I going to drink? Anira gulped hard and stared at the instant mocha swirling in the cup before her. It was local water. But it was the same as the shower, definitely less potent than the hot springs, although so far she had not ingested any local water at all. She gripped the handle and raised it for a careful swig, accidentally catching Mum's eye. What's the matter, dear? You look like you've just been handed a life sentence. Gulp. Again. She dropped her gaze and shrugged. Mum might very well be closer to the truth than she knew. Would these weird effects last a lifetime? Anira swallowed her coffee, felt its warmth slide down her insides. Her eyes sprang wide open as its traces of local minerals hit her stomach. I didn't imagine it. Okay, this was closer to the effect of a regular double espresso, except that she'd have to drink the entire thing to get this level of boing. She frowned at her cup. What would happen if she finished all of it? This was silly. If she didn't drink, she'd dehydrate. She might be able to buy bottled water later on, though Mum would find that strange. So she drank the mocha, slowly, observing the rise of awareness that came bit by bit this time instead of all at once, like it had when she stuck her feet in the pool. By the time she got done, she felt almost the same as she had in the night. So much for normality, and she reckoned this time it wouldn't wear off in a shower. In fact, it's spreading through you as the substance reaches farther into your digestive system. Great, now her own thoughts were addressing her as you. And this was just from the tap water. If she ever wanted a super kick, all she had to do was swallow a bit from an actual hot spring, right? She smiled ruefully to herself. Anira helped Quincy finish dressing, then Mum locked the cabin behind them and the three of them wandered back out to the car park. A woman came out of the big house, Tiger's mother by the likeness between them. Did you sleep well? "Good, thanks," said Mum, smothering a yawn. "We're just going to look around town a little bit to get started." She waved in a southerly direction. "You were the only ones here last night, aside from us. We're expecting to fill up tonight, though." The owner approached and stood almost in handshake distance. Anira braced for the scent she'd smelled on Tiger and the lake runner, but there was nothing. She sidled closer to the woman as Mum continued to exchange small talk. Pretty soon she'd managed to place herself right beside her, as near as she could get without seeming weird. No aroma. None of that smell that wasn't the smell. Okay. Conversation finished, Tiger's mum glanced at Anira and drifted back to the house. Mum unlocked the driver's door, slid in, and leaned across to pop the button on the passenger side. Anira reached around through the front doors to open the back for Quincy. When everyone was settled and Mum had made the seatbelt call, she started up and they puttered out through the narrow tree-lined driveway. Steam rose from the street drains again. Anira guessed it never really stopped. She pictured again the night scene at the lake with the moonlit water, the black shapes of the land, and the ethereal hot plumes rising from around its edges, and wondered if today's sights could match up to that. Mum had driven only about 3 blocks when she turned off the main road again, away from the lake. She parked the car near a low-rise that hid what might lie beyond it. Here we go! Opening the car door was not as surprising as the first time, but there was a definite increase in atmospheric weight here. Anira didn't know what else to call it. She breathed it in, wobbled only slightly. Then the mind-sharpening effect kicked in. Every detail became clearer, every sound sharper even than it had been after her coffee. Anira followed the others around the hillock and came face to face with a pit of hell. It was fenced off, to be sure, and the wood pilings bore a small white sign that read, "Danger, Thermal." Well, it had been white at one time. Its surface was well blackened with mineral deposits that caused the edges to crumble. She approached the fence, gripping its top with bloodless knuckles. The hole was deep and wide, ringed with lush trees that were partly coated in bright orange mineral deposits that came from a room-sized expanse of pale, boiling mud. Its bubbles did not rise fast, as they would in boiling water. Rather, pockets of air about as big as tennis balls rose up under the surface and broke in their turn, sending soft splats of the stuff flying into the air to fall down again with a glug. The steam that issued from the pool didn't smell quite the same as by the lake, but there was no way to touch it. Even if there hadn't been a stout fence blocking her way, Anira wouldn't want to touch it. They wandered the pathways between fenced mud holes and steaming vents, while Quincy oohed and ahed over each new spectacle. At one point they passed a small area marked off with road cones and tape, as if a utility company was doing underground work. Anira looked closer. It was a new crack in the ground, emitting its own steam. The hot springs must run under this entire park. They passed the garden area, and Mum led the way into a roofed shelter. It covered the shallow pool she'd spoken of, not quite knee-deep, and surrounded with ground-level wooden benches for foot-bathers to sit on. Mum wasted no time in peeling off her sneakers and socks and plopped down on a bench, sliding her feet into the somewhat murky water. Then she saw Anira's frown. "Don't worry about the colour, it's just the mineral silt. It's good for you." "I want to go in," announced Quincy. Mum sat him down and began to undo his footwear. Anira sighed. Might as well see what happens. She settled backwards on the bench to remove her shoes, then swiveled around and hesitated for just a second before slipping her feet into Earth's essence. It made itself known immediately. Unlike the lakeshore spring, this one caressed her almost intangibly. The temperature was so close to that of her skin that she could barely tell where the water came up to, unless she looked carefully. Fascinated, she rubbed her leg with her hand and found the liquid texture silky smooth, as if extra light, extra thinned. She smirked. What could water be diluted with? Air? But this water wasn't going straight to her head. Instead of being invigorating, it was more relaxing. Perhaps this was more like what most people experienced around here. Most people. Not her. She was surely a freak.